Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Robo Celestial here with a new video for you. Welcome to What If Deku Could Use Haki. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax, you're in for a treat. When Izuku woke up, he found himself inside a hospital room, with Gran Torino waiting patiently for him. The retired hero began scolding him immediately, but was cut off when the chief of police entered the room. The police chief started by telling Izuku that Todoroki was okay, and that Ida had been hurt but would recover. The green-haired boy breathed a heavy sigh of relief upon hearing this, until the chief continued to speak. He told Izuku that he was reckless, and actually had no right to harm the hero killer. He then proceeded to say that Endeavor would get the credit for catching Stain, so that Izuku wouldn't get into trouble. The police chief then lowered his head and thanked the green-haired boy for his efforts, even if no one else would hear about it. Izuku was about to say something, but was cut off by the door flying open. "There you are," an old and annoyed voice shouted. As it entered the room, the green-haired boy turned his gaze towards it, only to see Rayleigh standing in the doorway. "Rayleigh," Izuku exclaimed, only to be cut off by Rayleigh's fist. "You idiot, are you trying to get yourself killed?" the silver-haired geezer shouted. Sounding infuriated, Izuku raised his hands in defense. As he spoke, "Sorry, I'm Waowa," only to be cut off once more. "I don't want to hear your excuses. Be better next time," Rayleigh then shouted, holding his clenched fist over Izuku's head. "Owa, what was that for?" Izuku then shouted. After Rayleigh had hit him for a third time, the silver-haired geezer sighed before he answered, "Nothing. I just wanted to," before lowering his arm. Gran Torino and the others who were watching were all in shock. This random old man just walked into the room and began beating on Izuku, not caring that he was standing in a hospital. The retired hero then regained his composure as he walked up and greeted the man. "I'm Gran Torino. You must be Midoriya's master," the retired hero said, as he reached for a handshake. Rayleigh looked at the man before he smiled and shook his hand. "Silver's Rayleigh. Nice to meet you," the silver-haired geezer then said. Gran Torino smiled at the old man before he said, "You have a fine student, but he's a handful to deal with." With a calm voice, Rayleigh giggled after hearing this, as he said, "Yeah, I know all about that. Words don't get through that thick skull of his." With a broad smile, the two old men then laughed loudly, both on a mutual understanding of what was spoken. Izuku was still rubbing his head from Rayleigh's hits, until his pain was overwritten by confusion. This confusion stemmed from the fact that he couldn't tell whether it was Rayleigh or Gran Torino talking. They sounded too similar. Are they the same person? Izuku thought, his mind overwhelmed by confusion, until he remembered something. He remembered that Stain had been able to use Haki, and he needed to inform Rayleigh about it immediately. The green-haired boy looked towards the two old men before he spoke up. "Rayleigh, can we talk in private?" he said, sounding calm. Rayleigh looked at Izuku curiously, as he asked, "Why? Is something wrong?" Sounding like he was joking, the silver-haired geezer then changed into a serious expression as he saw Izuku's face. The green-haired boy wasn't messing around. He was being dead serious. Whatever it was that he needed to talk about, it was urgent. Rayleigh turned his expression towards the others in the room before he said, "Please, give us some privacy." With a cold voice, they all looked shocked upon hearing this, but they quickly did as the silver-haired geezer told them. Rayleigh then turned back to Izuku, as he asked, "So, what's wrong?" With a serious tone, Izuku looked at his master, as he answered, "It's about Stain." With a serious tone of his own, Rayleigh raised an eyebrow upon hearing this, as he responded, "I already know that it was you, and not Endeavor, who beat him. I'm old, not stupid." Almost sounding disappointed, Izuku was unfazed by this, as he said, "It's not that. It's far more urgent. He used Haki." With the same serious tone, Rayleigh's eyes went wide upon hearing this, for it was something he hadn't expected. He knew that there were more Haki users out there, but he didn't know that someone as dangerous as the hero killer was one of them. "You're right, that is far more urgent. Now I'm even more relieved that you're okay," Rayleigh then said, letting his shock be known. Izuku didn't break his gaze upon the silver-haired geezer, as he then said, "Yeah, I was really lucky." I'm pretty sure that he could see into the future. While scratching his chin, Rayleigh's eyes went even wider now. He was certain that Izuku would one day face another Haki user, and maybe face one that could see the future eventually. The fact that he faced another user so early, and that this user happened to be the hero killer and was able to use foresight, only proved to make him more relieved about Izuku's well-being. The silver-haired geezer then calmed himself down before he decided to speak again. "I'm speechless. But now it all makes sense, Rayleigh said. As he took a seat and scratched his chin, Izuku looked at him curiously. As the silver-haired geezer continued, I overheard what that Ida kid told the police. He claimed that he had been pinned by the hero killer and was about to be killed, when he suddenly stopped and left as if he was an animal that had caught the scent of more prey. He must have used observation and sensed you from far away, he said, with the same voice as before. Izuku was shocked and relieved to hear this. The green-haired boy then composed himself. As he voiced another thing that bothered him, there was something strange about Stain. It was like he didn't know what it was. It sounds weird, but he probably believed that it was part of his quirk, Izuku said, almost finding it hard to believe his own words. Rayleigh got a weird reaction upon hearing these words. He sighed heavily before he pinched the bridge of his nose. It wasn't that his students' words were idiotic. It was the opposite, in fact. The possibility of this happening had crossed his mind a multitude of times, and it bothered him every time. So people are starting to unlock and discover Haki on accident, thinking that it's just part of their quirk. I knew this day would come, but why now of all times? Stain just proves that the new users lack proper guidance, so they go around and wreak havoc. More villains are gaining these powers. There are already too many evildoers who use it. We would need more heroes with proper training to use Haki. But that means, Rayleigh said, sounding distraught with every word. He didn't even dare to finish his words. But Izuku knew and did it for him. It means revealing the secret to more people. Maybe even the entire world. The green-haired boy finished, picking up on Rayleigh's distraught behavior. The silver-haired geezer looked at Izuku, glad that he understood, before he said, yes, but luckily we haven't gotten to that point yet. The world is changing quickly, especially after last night, but we don't have to make that decision yet. We just have to make sure that the option is on the table when the time comes. With a happier voice than before, Izuku was still a little distraught, until he felt something over his head. It was Rayleigh, and he was patting the green-haired boy. Izuku looked confused, for Rayleigh normally hits him. I should be scolding you for letting the hero killer track you down, but I won't. You survived a battle against what was arguably your toughest opponent yet. That is deserving of praise. Not only that, but you also saved your classmate. If Stain hadn't sensed you, he definitely would have killed that Ida kid. He might not be aware of it, but he wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for you, the silver-haired geezer said, smiling broadly as he spoke. Izuku smiled happily upon hearing this. He was glad that his master was proud of him, and that he managed to indirectly save his classmate. Rayleigh then stopped patting Izuku, before saying, I should get going. Enjoy this week. It'll be hell when you come back. With a devilish grin on his face, Izuku shivered upon hearing this, until he was reminded of something hilarious. Speaking of which, Gran Torino is trying to make his training more brutal than yours, Izuku said, barely able to hold in his laughter. Rayleigh didn't have the same amount of control as his student, for he just burst out laughing. Yeah. I wish him good luck, the silver-haired geezer said, barely able to speak due to all the laughter. He then turned towards the door. As he said, I'll see you around, Izuku, still giggling a little. Before he left the room, the rest of the internship went on as it should have. Izuku was still being trained by Gran Torino, who tried his damnedest to make it miserable. It was towards the end of the internship that he was onto something, by blindfolding and tying Izuku's limbs up before telling him to dodge oncoming attacks. The old man didn't have enough time to develop this exercise before Izuku had to return to UA. The students all gathered in the classroom, all talking about what they did during their internships. Izuku was mostly stoic and silent, not uttering a single word. He was still thinking about what he and Rayleigh had discussed in the hospital. There was a possibility that they would have to tell people about Haki, and the green-haired boy was trying to decide which of his classmates would be a good pick. If it came down to it, they would have to teach them, regardless if they had the conqueror's spirit or not. But who would be the best choice? Hey, Deku, a feminine voice said, knocking Izuku out of his thoughts. The green-haired boy jumped as he turned towards the source of the voice. Uraraka, don't scare me like that, he exclaimed, almost sounding a little panicked. The brown-haired girl looked a little concerned as she responded, sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. You were spacing out. I was just wondering what was happening, she said, still sounding a little concerned. Izuku just sighed heavily. He knew that he couldn't tell Uraraka about his thought process, or about Stain, so he had to brush it off as well as he could. Thanks, but there's nothing wrong, the green-haired boy said, sounding as calm as possible. Uraraka could still sense that something was off about Izuku. She wondered if something had happened, if he experienced something bad during his internship. The brown-haired girl didn't get to ask him about it, As the door flung open, "Good morning, class," a tired Aizawa said. And everyone took their seats. The tired teacher was then quick to inform everyone about the upcoming final exams. While reminding them to both study and train, most of the class began to panic. Mostly about the written portion, while a few seemed to be calm. Izuku was among the calm ones. But he was still struggling internally. It wasn't anything related to the exam, for he was confident in his abilities. It was about having to tell others. He wasn't sure that he could make the right choice, or if the others were anywhere near ready. Time passed, and the practical portion of the exam had arrived. Class 1 had been told that it would be similar to the entrance exam, a battle against robots. They were surprised, however, when they arrived and were greeted by the many teachers of UA. The class looked confused, until Nezu showed up and told them how things would play out. They would be split off into teams of 2. Each team would face off against one of the teachers. In order to pass, they would have to either escape or cuff the teacher before time runs out. Most of the class began to shiver in fear. Even after hearing that the teachers would wear extra weights in order to balance things out. Izuku, however, was as calm as ever, even after finding out that he was paired up with Katsuki and was up against none other than All Might. Now then, unless anyone has any more questions, let's begin, Nezu then said, motioning everyone to prepare themselves in some shape or form. Izuku looked towards Katsuki and looked skeptical. It was true that the blonde wasn't nearly as aggressive towards him as he used to, but he wasn't sure if he would listen to a word he said. Kaken, are you willing to listen to a plan? The green-haired boy asked, sounding as stoic as ever. Katsuki glared at him as he answered, depends on what it entails, with a half-aggressive voice. Izuku was genuinely surprised to hear this, for Katsuki would normally not listen. He didn't let his shock last for long, until he began to think. They were facing All Might, therefore their best bet would be to escape. Izuku, however, felt that he wanted something else. He wanted to see how far he's come and test his abilities on the number 1 hero. It was great, because he could sense that Katsuki felt the same way. Let's just say that I don't plan on running away, the green-haired boy said, sounding as calm as before. Katsuki looked surprised upon hearing this, until he grinned widely. The exams played out, with some students passing while others didn't. Everyone had now gathered in the monitor room in order to observe the last group, Izuku and Katsuki versus All Might. Many of the students began taking bets on what would happen, not caring that almost all of the teachers were watching them do this. Until an old and gruff voice could be heard. Has it started yet? It asked. Everyone turned to face it, only to none other than Rayleigh entering the room. Class 1 were about to question his presence, until Aizawa said, so you received my invitation. It's about to start now. With his usual tired voice, the class was shocked to hear this, until they remembered that it made sense since Rayleigh was Izuku's mentor. The silver-haired geezer walked up to the big screen. As he said, I see. So I missed nothing of importance. Quite boldly, everyone got angry upon hearing this, for Rayleigh was outright saying that they didn't matter. Class 1 was visibly annoyed, and some finally realized where Izuku got his attitude from. Aizawa was annoyed, but quickly shrugged it off when he realized something. The old man was Izuku's mentor. Therefore Izuku might be the only thing of importance to him. The tired teacher shared a mere glare with his students, until they all went quiet. Mr. Rayleigh, are you sure that Deku will be okay? I know that he's strong, and that his opponent is wearing extra weights, but he's still up against All Might. Uraraka then asked, sounding a little nervous as she did. Rayleigh looked confident at first, but then he looked dumbfounded as he said, he's wearing weights. What the hell is he thinking? Does he have Death Wish or something? Everyone looked shocked upon hearing this, for they all knew what it implied. Aizawa gathered himself quickly and voiced what everyone was thinking. Are you saying that Midoriya will defeat All Might? Sounding a little shocked, Rayleigh didn't change his expression in the slightest, as he answered, yes. Without a doubt, everyone was still shocked, unsure of what to think. They knew that Izuku was strong, and that he was capable of some incredible things, but he's still quirkless, so how would he be able to defeat All Might? The room was silent, until the exam finally started. Izuku and Katsuki moved up through the city together, both looking as confident as ever. Eventually a massive gust of wind blew in front of them, forcing them to brace. All right, heroes, let's see how you handle this, the loud voice of All Might announced, bringing everyone to attention. Izuku looked towards Katsuki, until the blonde nodded. The green-haired boy then turned his expression towards All Might. Right as he got closer to him, the blonde hero tried to attack Izuku, But the green-haired boy saw it coming and dodged. Izuku then grabbed onto All Might, throwing him off balance before he shouted, "Now!" On cue with the signal, Katsuki came out with a devilish grin. He readied one of his gauntlets. Before pulling the pin, the blast engulfed All Might. But it also engulfed Izuku. This was their plan. It was to have Izuku bait All Might off balance before shooting him with an explosion. The plan did involve blasting Izuku as well. But almost everyone knew that Katsuki couldn't hurt Izuku even if he tried. The dust cleared, and All Might had staggered. The teens didn't let the pro breathe. As they began repeating the process over and over, the observers in the monitor room were all in awe. Izuku's and Katsuki's plan was a good one. And it was actually bringing All Might down to his knees. So this is what Mr. Rayleigh was talking about. At this rate they'll actually defeat All Might, Ida commented, sounding just as awestruck as the others. Rayleigh heard this and scoffed, before he said, "Blondie's just toying with them. The real fight is just about to begin." With his usual calm voice, everyone was confused by Rayleigh's statement. Until they saw what was happening on the screen. Izuku was about to throw All Might off balance once more. But something changed. The number one hero grinned. As he pushed Izuku back with a powerful blow, the green-haired boy jumped back, barely dodging, but his teammate wasn't as lucky. Katsuki was caught out by All Might, as he was thrown into a wall and knocked unconscious. "Your partner is out of the game. What will you do now, hero?" All Might then said, sounding as villainous as he could. Izuku took a look around. As he addressed the situation, the plan had been compromised, and he was facing All Might. The most logical thing to do is to try and escape, but that is not what Izuku wanted to do. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. The chance to test your strength against the number one hero. And the green-haired boy was going to take that chance. Izuku looked towards All Might, wearing a grin of his own, as he said, "Isn't it obvious? I'm gonna knock your teeth out." All Might took this as an invitation and charged at Izuku. The hero threw punches from all directions at blinding speeds, each of them being enough to break something. Izuku was just dodging all of them almost effortlessly, using his observation haki to see the attacks. Rayleigh smiled upon witnessing this, for the internship had made Izuku stronger. The spars with Gran Torino and his battle with Stain had made Izuku better at avoiding deadly hits, even though it wasn't as brutal as Rayleigh's. Gran Torino's training had paid off nicely. Izuku kept avoiding All Might's punches like there was not tomorrow, until he had enough. He ducked under the hero's extended arm. As he delivered a haki-infused punch straight into All Might's face, the hero was knocked back slightly, until Izuku ran up and continued throwing punches and kicks towards the hero. All Might took almost all of the hits, and it didn't help that Izuku's arms and legs were covered with armament haki. The hero took more and more damage from Izuku's blinding barrage, until it was too much. Eventually he was knocked back, before he crashed into the ground. The observers were all stunned and silent, for they didn't know how to react. All Might, the number one hero, had been knocked down by a mere kid. Not just any kid either. It was a quirkless kid. "You're kidding, right?" Kaminari then asked nervously, as if he risked his life by even making a sound. "My eyes must be deceiving me. Did he seriously just do that?" Yaoyorozu then said, sounding just as nervous as Kaminari. The room was silent once more, until Aizawa spoke and said what no one dared to say. "No way, he did it. He just defeated All Might in a bare-knuckle brawl," the normally tired teacher said, while his eyes were wide open, as if some sort of relief had been spilled. The room went wild. The students began cheering for Izuku, and the teachers didn't stop them from making noise. Aizawa was genuinely impressed, for Izuku always found a way to leave everyone awestruck. The tired teacher then turned to see Rayleigh's reaction, only to stop smiling. The silver-haired geezer wasn't smiling. It was as if he knew that it wasn't over yet. Aizawa looked towards All Might on the screen, until a cold shiver ran down his spine. He saw something that made him realize what Rayleigh had found. All Might was still grinning. He was still conscious. The blonde hero jumped back onto his feet again, causing everyone in the monitor room to go silent. They watched All Might approach Izuku slowly, before stopping a good distance away from him and saying, "That was impressive. You're way stronger than I ever imagined, but something's bugging me. You could have easily passed the exam by escaping. So why did you choose to stay and fight?" Izuku looked surprised to hear this, until he grew annoyed. "You disappoint me, All Might. Do you insist that I run away and leave my friend behind?" The green-haired boy answered, while pointing towards the still unconscious Katsuki. All Might was shocked. Then Izuku continued, "Know this, All Might, no matter the danger, No matter the situation, I will never abandon my friends, the green-haired boy said with a determined voice. Unaware of the weak waves that his spirit emitted, All Might was speechless, for this was an answer that he didn't expect from Izuku. He expected the green-haired boy to say that he just wanted to fight. But it turns out that there's more to it than that. He then grinned, as he said, "Impressive. It seems that I've misunderstood you as I've underestimated you. Let's see if you can stay true to those words." With an ominous voice, Izuku immediately raised his guard, for he sensed something within All Might. The hero had become more threatening, as if he was finally going to take this seriously. The green-haired boy didn't know what All Might was planning, but he knew that it was bad. The observers started to grow nervous. They didn't know what anyone on the screen said, but they knew that All Might was doing something that would potentially turn the tide. They all then watched as All Might did something he was specifically told not to do. He took his extra weights off. The teachers all went wild with worry, all wanting to just scream and tell All Might to stop. They all wanted to just end the exam and say that Izuku had done enough to pass. But they didn't. They could see how determined the fighters were, and that alone made them stop. They didn't want to ruin All Might and Izuku's bout. Finally, now the real fight has begun, Rayleigh shouted with a smile, making everyone realize that he was waiting for this. They all then stared at the screen until both fighters charged into battle.